My name is Aaliyah AAL244-01. I'm in your African American Literature class, Section 1, and this is my final presentation.
Try some of the key consideration that Black authors, scholar, artists had to make from the period of chattel slavery through the Black Power movement.
For my time being in African American Literature class, we discussed a lot about the Black Power movement, which was mainly about Black pride, protecting Black rights, and just giving us a voice, as well as speaking to the people and letting them know, we can do this together. And they worked as one, and this was just a way for them to get more help and more consideration because we weren't welcome. And a lot of the stories that we read, the authors had to disguise themselves when telling people what exactly happened because they didn't want to get in trouble. They weren't allowed to write, really. So any of the stuff that we are reading was written so long ago, but it probably wasn't, put out there until far after slavery had ended, which slavery still hasn't ended, really. So just a lot of the things that they had to take in consideration is that they had to be mindful of what they said, how they said it, what they drew, what they described to be. They just had to be really mindful, and in a sense, in all of that, they still had to make note that the oppressors understood where they were coming from, so they had to speak their language so that they could understand, this is a very, very serious matter.
In the Black art movement, Larry Neal insists the following: the motive behind the Black aesthetic is the destruction of the white things, the destruction of the white idea, and the white ways of looking at the world. The new aesthetic is mostly predicated on the ethic which asks the question whose version of the world is finally more meaningful, ours or the white oppressors. Give Neil perspective or there any aspect of your life experience that Neil might consider illustrative of the oppressive system that needs to be destroyed.
I've been on this earth for 19 years, and I believe that we all have our own perceptions. So in a sense, I'm in an African American literature class, and 95% of us are African American descent. We only have one Caucasian male, and we have one Latina girl. Just being in that class, I got to learn a lot about their culture, really, because on the outside looking in, it's just like, oh, we're the only minority, we're the only one that actually deals with racism and prejudice and everything like that. So just meeting them and getting to know her, she just said, we had some of the same relations. We could relate on a lot of aspects. And the perception of it all is that, we're just not the only ones that go through, racism. It's other races as well. Even though we were in slavery, there is still other races that were put in the same categories, and they still get, people just have stereotypes, and they just put them in those categories because it's like, oh, well, this is just what I know. I don't actually ask them and get to know them for really who they are. So those are just some of the things that he addressed in the Black arts movement, about how we need to shut down the white ideas and what they think of us and how they think of us, because if we start to rely on that stereotype, we start to become them, we start to become their ideas.
Clearly compare and contrast your impression about African American literature culture before you enrolled in African American literature with the understanding you have now that class is over.
This is actually the most African American history that I have actually learned throughout college and high school, because they really don't address African American history at all in the public school system. So being in this class, I didn't really know what to expect at first, because a lot of my classmates said, she's too hard, she grades too tough, and everything like that. So I just decided to take it. I really needed the class anyway. So I took the class, and when I got in there, a lot of the stuff I thought I knew, I really didn't know. And she kind of informed us on what it actually was and how it was, because we never got that actual knowledge in high school or even in history classes. I actually learned more in this African American literature class than I did in history. And she just basically if anything, I learned more about our history and actually what the Black Arts Movement was and about the Black Power movement, that they were not the same thing, that they were two different revolution groups. Black arts was focused on the arts of Black culture, so dancing, music, poetry, drawing, writing, anything to, express what they went through in slavery. And Black Power was mainly focused on, protests. They did some evil things just in consideration, but majority of the stuff that I learned a lot when I came to African American literature class. I went in there and thought I knew a lot, and I actually came out and knew way more.
Explain how your own self perceptions have changed over the course of the semester.
Again, as I stated in the other question, we all have our own perceptions. So me being in the class, it kind of made me realize that if I don't want to be in a stereotypical image for people to look at me and say, she's too light, or she talks too white, or she talks too black, she's too ghetto, then I can't put anybody else in that category. I can't say, oh, I know she's from Mexico just because, her skin color looks like, I can't do that. So being in that class, it just made me look at, the way people look at other people. We can't really just say perceptions, and we can't really just perceive people to be just anything or what we think they are, because we don't know them, and we actually have to get to know that person before we decide like who they are and what they're about. And that's just always been the main point of life in this class, and that's it. So yeah.